Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our weekly Innovative Business Advisors webinar. We're really excited to have you today, and we have a great topic. No guest today, just myself and Terry as your panelists today. Or I'm sorry, Steve, I called you Terry. Myself and Steve as your panelists today. And Steve will do the primary presentation. I will pipe in, and we're going to talk about value today and the some strategies and techniques that you might look at in terms of understanding and building value in your company. It's not about valuation, but it really is about some practical approaches to making your business more valuable to a potential suitor, and even more valuable to you if you plan to continue forward with that business. Want to remind you again, we're on the Zoom portal, and within Zoom at the bottom of your screen, you should see several avatars. There is one avatar that says Q&A. If you have questions anytime during this webinar, feel free to type in your question, and I will monitor that Q&A dialogue, and I will ask your questions so that we can answer them during the webinar. We do record the webinar. There will be a recording of this webinar along with any PowerPoint slides that we share. So look for that tomorrow. I'll remind you again, and I'll remind you at the end of the presentation to go into our YouTube channel and subscribe, because you will be notified as soon as we upload the information from today's webinar, so that you can go back in and watch it or pull any documents that are of interest to you. Okay, Steve, I think that's enough in the way of introduction. I'm going to turn it over to you, and let's talk about value.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you, Marquita. Interesting topic today. We're talking about building value in 2021, 7 essential questions to answer about your company. No secret, 2020 was one tumultuous year. Boy, did we all experience some changes. So it's a good time to really begin to assess that. We've talked a lot about the aid programs over the last several weeks. They're all progressing pretty well. There have been lots of guidance and clarification that has been shared. Nothing real earth-shattering, just a couple of things that have been, clarifications, if you will. The live venue grant program is still not open, but there was a large FAQ document that came out, and we shared it on our attachments last week. I'm going to load it up again this week to the attachments to this as well, if anybody is in that particular business. But every business has had to survive, pivot, and some have even thrived over the last year, and we've been talking about that as our central theme. Today we're going to talk about building value as you really are getting through this, and we can finally see some light at the end of the tunnel from this unusual pandemic experience. It's a great opportunity to really think long and hard about your business and potentially think differently about your business. So just to give a little bit of consideration in that regard, if you think about that and your business has been damaged, use the comparison of, what if your home had been damaged in some form of disaster? How would you approach that? You certainly would be thinking about rebuilding, but would you be thinking about rebuilding it exactly the same? Or would you be potentially thinking about doing it differently? So, if you've come through this past year and your business has suffered some damage, it's a good time to have that same thought process for yourself and your business. And we've certainly done that. We're going to share a little bit of insight about what we've done, and then provide some practical guidelines that potentially can help you as you consider that for your particular business. So, would you rebuild it the same as it was before? Probably not. You might potentially think about building, the home of your dreams, right? Building it back differently, or as the new administration says, build back better, right? So, that's a good starting point for the discussion, and I would invite you to think about that as we move into this. We're really talking about building value, and the crisis has certainly had a significant effect on businesses, and we're in a position where the storm is now seemingly, at least in the broadest sense, behind us, and we can see some real light at the end of the tunnel. And that's when the opportunity really begins to open up. So, you know, without the forces of inertia that have been keeping us blocked inside our homes for the last several months, many businesses are reopening, at least in some particular level. Some are able to reopen fully. Some have had to reopen in stages. But it's a great opportunity for you to really just to think about the future and decide where you want to be. And it's the opportunity to rethink how you approach your company, and is there an opportunity to rebuild in a way that you've always dreamed of. So, you know, very often that can be very difficult to do, because, you know, like sailing, the forces of the wind can drive you in different ways, in different directions. And now may be the appropriate opportunity to think about which way would you want to go, which way do you want to tack into and move. And we're going to talk a lot about valuation as we dig into this, but this could be the unique moment for you to reassess everything that's gone down, your past, the experiences that you've had, and where you really would like to move into the future. Because, you know, frankly, businesses are very much like a patchwork of products and services. And we see this every day in our business. You know, the founders start out with a dream of their business. They work hard, create some customers, create some products and services for their business. And basically the business begins to evolve, and it really can become a patchwork of various products, services, and customers. So some of that can be a little bit of a mismatch. Some of it is ideally suited, but you know, every business is got a little bit of range to it, and that's perfectly normal, because there are products and services and customers that you might really enjoy dealing with, and there might be some that are kind of necessary evils, or even beyond that, are ones that in hindsight you wish you didn't have. But you know, you may be in a position where you can make some changes in that regard. We'll talk a little bit about innovative here. So, you know, back when we think about back in late February of last year, the beginning of March, our business was almost 100% services based. We help people buy and sell companies. We do a lot of valuation work, and that was what we did every single day. The whole education process and coaching was a little bit of what we had done to help companies that weren't quite ready yet to go to market, or to help them build some value within their company. But the education process for us was brand new. So, you know, we got pulled into this, and Marquita's been a real trooper leading these webinars for all these months now, and we've really evolved to deliver a lot of education. One of the other things that we've done is supplemented that with a strategic partnership with Experts for Entrepreneurs as well, beginning of January of 2021. So we're a partner in that organization, and beginning to really focus on providing educational tools to the business owner community. So I use this just to really illustrate that, you know, every business has been affected in some way or another. This is how it's affected our business. We were pretty much one-sided in a services-based business, and now we've become a pretty strong three-legged stool in terms of providing a lot of coaching materials and a lot of educational materials. And frankly, it's been, you know, for us, there was part of that was driven by necessity, and part of that was an outshoot of serving the communities that we are honored to serve. So it's been an interesting pivot, and I don't think any company is immune to that. But let me talk about kind of transition in that regard and talk about business valuation. Now, there is one kind of immutable law of business valuation. When you think about what is your company worth in the outside marketplace, and that is specifically this: you know, thou shalt not pay for what we can do ourselves. So acquirers are not willing to pay for any business that they feel like they could easily duplicate on their own. There must be some uniqueness. There must be some real value underlying that. in order for them to be attractive to that and thus be willing to pay a seller a premium for a particular business. And this really should help guide your thinking every day. It's so easy to get caught up in just doing what is necessary to keep your business operating from day to day, but you've got to bake in some uniqueness. You've got to bake in some real strengths into your company, and we're going to go through several of those and talk about those today. Let me give you just a basic rule of thumb process from that business owners do tend to think about when they value their business. So we'll start with, just for the sake of example here, let's start with a company that's got about $5 million in revenues, and the business has got a cost of goods sold of $2 million, and basically gross profit of $3 million, operating expenses of $2.2 million, and profit before tax of $800,000. Now, everybody, I think, has an appreciation for businesses tend to trade for a multiple of the pre-tax profit, and in some instances for a multiple of the revenues. So a lot of the SaaS companies, software as a service companies, a lot of the internet companies that are selling products and services solely on the internet, a lot of those e-commerce type of businesses tend to sell for multiples of revenues. And a lot of the more traditional businesses, think about Main Street type of manufacturing, distribution, professional services businesses, they tend to sell more for a multiple of the profits rather than a multiple of the revenues. But in this situation, I'm just going to use a relatively common number that a lot of people think about. Think about a multiple of 4 here. So, is it reasonable to expect that if your business had $800,000 in pre-tax cash flow, that you could achieve a 4 multiple? I would say that in many industries, the answer to that is yes. And in some industries, the answer to that is no. But just accept that for the sake of our example here. Quick math would say then, okay, that business has got a fair market value of somewhere in the neighborhood of $3.2 million, right? But if that business is in a position where it's got sales that are made up with many different components, that valuation, while that might be, a relatively common rule of thumb, it may not match what the market is currently dictating for those particular products. So let me give you an example of that. A buyer, as they're looking at that business coming into it, they may value it much differently than a seller is thinking about the value of their business. So remember, the law of business valuation, acquirers only value the sales that they would say would be difficult for them to do on their own. So in this particular example, if you've got a business that's selling a commodity product that's easy to duplicate in the marketplace, an acquirer may not have a real high valuation on that. But if you've got a specific differentiated product in your portfolio that would be extremely difficult for them to duplicate, that's where they may see the real value in your company. And this is a relatively common thinking process that buyers bring to the table. And in a situation like this, they would say commodity products, we're not really willing to pay that much for because we can duplicate those on our own, without any real problem whatsoever. But it's the real differentiated products that are part of your portfolio where the real value lies. And in that situation, they may say, hey, if you're only doing 400,000 in that area, we might only assign that a multiple of 2. And, a buyer might look at it and say, well, your valuation is off significantly from what your thought process is. Really, the business just has a valuation of $800,000. So, not thinking about the specific numbers for a minute, the point of the exercise is that very often we see situations where a seller may have one particular opinion of the value of the business, and buyers come in with a much different opinion of the buyers of the business. And that's really where we earn our keep in terms of being the intermediary in the transaction as well. Really being able to find the common ground that works out well for each of those parties, or a different set of parties, find somebody else that may be more in line with the value that the seller has in that situation. And candidly, in our experience at Innovative, we are very good at finding sellers that have a good, solid fair market value number in their head for their business. But we like to find buyers that are highly desirous of the specific aspects that a selling company brings to the market. So, we're looking for those that are willing to pay potentially even more than the fair market value, because the strategic value of adding their differentiated product to the existing portfolio of the buyer makes a much greater contribution than the seller may even appreciate. So we've got a pretty good track record of delivering on that. But again, I wanted to highlight for you, if thinking about yourself, if you are a business owner, that you have to give some thought to how do others within our industry take a look at our particular product, and how might they look at us in the marketplace, and what the value is that we bring to the table. This is really kind of the interesting part of this. And from a seller's perspective, you've always got to be thinking about the fact that buyers are looking for at least one of potentially 8 different things in a particular company. And if you've got uniqueness in any of these 8 areas, that's a real area of uniqueness that you want to stress. It's a point of differentiation and a particular strength that you can begin to leverage. So, number one, what do buyers look for? Many times they're looking for distribution channels that would be difficult or hard for them to build. So if you're in a particular niche of the marketplace that a buyer is not in, but they desire to be in that area and they recognize how hard it is to build, that's the one factor that'll often make a seller very attractive to an outside buyer. Another thing is if you've got a brand that your customers are very loyal to. So we have often told the story of a gentleman that built a phenomenal company in the heating and air conditioning business, served his community very well, but was very frustrated because there was somebody else in his marketplace that seemed to be growing much faster than he was. And for whatever reason, the competing brand seemed to be attracting a lot more customers to it. And this particular gentleman went out, and we actually helped him acquire the competing brand. And actually, what he learned was the competing brand had a lot more churn to it than it appeared to. They seemed to be getting all the new opportunities on the market, but they weren't very good at keeping those customers long term. But when he coupled that with his company, which was excellent at keeping long-term customers, just wasn't really good at being very competitive up front, he really turned out to have a very dynamic organization where he was able to learn some of the secrets of how do you acquire customers up front, how do you become more attractive to customers, and then his systems and processes were so strong that he kept those customers. He didn't lose them. So he fixed one of the deficiencies of the particular company that he ended up buying, and he ended up with an extremely valuable company in his marketplace. In fact, it became so strong that many of his competitors basically gave up the market. They learned they couldn't compete with him because the only way to compete with him was on price. And he had enough mass that he could compete at a higher level and at a lower price point for a longer period of time than many of his customers. So over the course of about 5 years, he ended up having almost 100% market share and building an incredibly durable company that was very valuable to his customers, and his customers were happy to have him as the only alternative in the marketplace. So that can be, having a brand that customers are loyal to can be a very compelling way to build a business. Another one is a customer base that just takes time to earn. And, you know, in a lot of instances like banking, for example, customers are very slow to change in that area. So, you know, if you think about going out and acquiring another company and they've got a set of very loyal customers out there, and you recognize in your particular industry, it takes a long time to earn a new customer. It can be very attractive and often the most productive way to grow your business by acquiring another group of customers from somebody else within your particular industry. And a lot of times, a lot of industries operate this way, like financial services, for example. The financial services industry, very often they grow by acquisition, not necessarily new customers coming into the mix. They just go out and buy other, you know, financial wealth management companies and add them into their existing book of business, because they know that, you know, in order to grow the customer base, it just takes a long period of time, usually counted in years, and it's much more productive to buy them up front. So, if you happen to be in an industry like that, that can be a very compelling reason for somebody to look at potentially acquiring your business. Another very important and kind of one of the top reasons that we see is strategic location. You know, they say the rules of real estate, what are the 5 rules of real estate? Location, 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 right? So very often, if you've got the right locations, even if your brand is a little bit tired or on the waning side, but you control the right locations, the location itself can be the driving force that will bring acquirers your way. And sometimes it's just a geographic build out as well. So a company that's operating in Kansas City might desire to do business in St. Louis, and the fastest way to enter that marketplace would be to acquire a company that's already operating in that marketplace. So we see adding, you know, acquisitions, buying into strategic locations and additional points of geography are very, very common ways that acquirers look at companies available. Another key metric today is technology as well. So, you know, it's fascinating. A lot of companies that have been around for a long period of time, particularly in the private company space, they have not invested as much in technology as some of the larger companies have. So, you know, if people have got proprietary technology that would be difficult to imitate, or the converse of that is if they themselves as an acquirer have that technology, but recognize that they could go buy competitors in the marketplace that don't have that technology and add that technology in, that could also be a very compelling reason to do it. So that there's kind of 2 sides of that particular coin. And we've seen that a lot in you know, old line industries, for example, like dry cleaning businesses, where people may not have the ability to reinvest in technology because their businesses are small. And some of the newer guys that are doing consolidations in that area will buy existing plants, take out all the old equipment, and basically operate from a central location, and then use the storefronts to just operate utilizing various forms of technology, and not necessarily have to have all the equipment at every point of location. So lots of ways to do roll-ups in that regard, and it works out very, very well. One of the key things that's emerged over the last several years is doing acquisitions specifically to get talent. And if you're in a position where you've got outstanding talent in your company, that can be very, very attractive for acquiring companies. It's been so difficult to recruit talent in the marketplace over the last several years, as unemployment's been, you know, pretty low in our economy, that this has emerged as a real strong reason for companies being out there and doing acquisitions. Another key thing is just differentiated products or services. So, you know, in an industry, if you've got something that is differentiated and is not available to some of your competitors, very often they'll be very desirous of the products or services that you have. And being able to bring those in and offer those to their existing clients is another excellent way that people tend to grow. And then, another thing that's a relatively new phenomenon in the last 10 years or so is search rankings. If you are in a business that does a lot of transaction volume, typically product type of businesses, and you have organic search rankings and presence online that a lot of competitors can't reach, sometimes those will be very, very attractive and make you very, very desirable in the marketplace as well. So this is just thinking about your business. As a business owner, we often find that the business owner focuses on the one or two things they do well, and they don't stand back and take kind of this global view of, there might be many reasons that we would be very attractive in a marketplace. So we want to offer this as a list out there for folks to think about as you're evaluating your particular company in that regard. So now's the time. If you're in a position where your business has had a challenging year, now's the time for you to really stand back and think about, are there some products and services that potentially we ought to prune and take some of the older, dying, or decaying areas out of our business, right? And because we know that those are taking our resources in very many situations. If you've got old or dying or decaying products or services in your line, they might be sucking resources that are just way out of proportion to what they're actually producing for you as a business, significantly complicating your lives, and they really are not adding any value. Now's a great time to think about that. This is literally one of those once in a generation opportunities where you have the opportunity to refocus on your business and prune away the things that really just aren't adding value anymore and focus on those new green shoots that are emerging from your business. So, the first step in that is running down what we call the 7 critical questions. So let's take a minute and walk through each of those and introduce you to those. And hopefully you'll take some notes from this and take the time to go think about this specifically for your business. The foundation of that is, what problem is your business trying to solve? It all starts with this. Every business is uniquely set up to help the customer solve a problem in one way or the other. And if you've been in business, or your company's been in business for a long time, you might have strayed pretty far away from this. But go back to the fundamentals. What is the problem that your business is trying to solve for your customers? And at the end of the day, that's what makes your business most valuable to your customers. It's why your customers come to you. You may have built a relationship with them. You may have, figured out how to help them solve this over time, and they rely on you now to do that routinely. But again, define what is that problem, and how has that problem changed over time? Maybe that problem hasn't completely gone away for them, but you've been able to help them minimize that. Are there other ways that you could potentially help them, completely eliminate that problem or attack it in such a way that adds a significant amount of value to your customer, value that they're willing to pay you for, that maybe you have thought about before, but just hadn't reached into that particular area. These are the times when you may want to take a step back and begin to look at that. So, what's the second thing? Now that you know what the problem is, well, who's most affected by this problem? Am I really touching all the customers that are available to me in that regard? I heard a couple of weeks ago in one of the E4E presentations that we were a party to, a gentleman's mindset of, I get up every single day and I know that we are uniquely qualified to help customers solve this problem. My job every day is to go out and find who in my local community has the biggest problem with this. Go find that one person. So Now that you've identified the problem, the next step is identifying who's living with this problem every day. And does my customer list, is it full of folks, all the folks that have that, or do I just have a small portion of the people that may be experiencing that particular problem, right? So define who your ideal customer is. Who is the one that's feeling this problem most acutely? And, you know, endeavor to reach out to them specifically, because if they're feeling the problem most acutely, you know, by their definition, they have the most pain. They may be willing to even pay you the most to get over this particular problem, and certainly value your services very, very highly in that regard. So, you know, you thought about who is this particular person, identify them as accurately as you can, and then match that up with your current customer base and make sure, you know, are you really attacking the market you desire to serve? Next, after that, is describe in the simplest terms possible, what does your company do to solve this problem? Can you put together a 30-second speech, what's known as an elevator speech, that describes very concisely what your company does and how you solve that problem in the simplest possible term? Because now that you've identified the particular market that you want to walk in, and those that are the highest probability of having this particular problem, you know, you've got a very short opportunity to get their attention. So you want to be very concise and be able to describe in the simplest possible terms, what is it that your company does to help them solve this problem? And it's a pretty good exercise that, if you haven't done this in some time, it's a great opportunity for you to do that. You know, Marquita and I, every day we work with companies that have been around for a long period of time. And when you stand back and take a look at what they're doing from a marketing material standpoint, from a brochure standpoint, from a website standpoint, it's fascinating how many times we see companies that may have put together a website in 2000, when that was kind of the newest and brightest shiny object that they felt was important. But here we are 21 years later and they hadn't touched it since. Or their brochures were created many, many years ago and they just haven't updated it to their most recent product descriptions and providing the widest range of things that they have. So very, very common problem. So you want to think about, in the simplest terms, what is the message about how your company goes about solving this particular problem for your customers, and then making sure that, you know, in all the ways that you communicate on social media, through your printed material, in the discussions that you're having in networking meetings, and in your outreach with your potential customers, are you guys all using the same language in that regard? Pretty good time to reassess that. Once you've got all of that down, the next point of that is really thinking about what gives you and your company an enduring competitive advantage out there. So you're uniquely set up to solve this problem. You've identified the people that have these particular problems, and you've sat down and really put some time into thinking about, in a very concise, simplest possible terms, how can you communicate how you do what you do. Also take some time to think about what gives you the enduring competitive advantage against your customers. And there's an interesting little pro tip that we would offer here as well. A lot of people say, well, we're the best quality. You know, we hear that routinely. What makes you different than your competitors? Well, we're the highest quality in the marketplace. I always tell our particular clients that, look, you know, if you weren't high quality, your customers wouldn't be dealing with you. Quality is the point of entry in your industry. So if you're thinking that you're differentiating yourself on quality, think again. Companies with poor quality do not last long. Those companies are in and out of industries typically very, very quickly. So if you've got bad quality, I got news for you. You're not going to be around long. You're not going to build an enduring company, because customers vote with their feet, and they will vote to go next door to the company that has better quality. So if quality is your only competitive advantage, I would invite you to think long and hard about the other things that you deliver for your customers in that regard. And if quality and price is your only advantage, again, I would invite you to think long and hard about that, because, low price is not the way to develop a company that allows you to endure over time, because you are going to need margins to cover the additional costs that you're going to take on as you grow your business. And being the low price leader is something that only one company can stake out, and typically those companies are not known for their quality either, and it becomes a vicious cycle that can help you circle the drain, if you will. So think about quality is the requirement to being in business. There is some fair market price that the market is willing to pay for your services, so you may not necessarily need to lead with price, right? But what are the other differentiating factors that can truly make you stand out in the marketplace? And when you can do that, that's what Warren Buffett calls building a moat around your business. If you can stake out an enduring competitive advantage that no other competitor in your marketplace can really attack, if there's something that you do better than anybody else, or maybe you're the only one that does it that way, that gives you a real sense of security in the environment. And we
Hey,
would,
Steve, I kind of want to jump in here because this is really making me think a lot about what we see happening here in the, coming out of 2020 with COVID, and specific businesses, especially, and I'm thinking in the context of restaurant, food service businesses, the whole transition, if you will, to shipment of frozen food, perishable food, cook at home meals, things of that nature, as filling the void that happened when our families could no longer go out to restaurants. And I think that the points you make here are absolutely right on and spot on relative to, I think, some of the companies that I've done business with. I think I've probably ordered from every one of them, whether they deliver it as frozen, deliver it as, fresh packed, quick delivery, a meal kit or whatever. The quality is so different in terms of uh, the condition of the food as it arrived, how it's packed, the tastiness of it, a variety of other things, that there are some I would never order from again, and this is a real interesting point. I see it very heavily in that market. I'm trying to think about some of the others where having quality there, and there's no price performance issue at all. It's either good or it's not. It's quality or it's not. And it's a real interesting thing to look at, especially if you think about this concept in the context of your industry. How do you deliver quality that is superior? And some people, I've shared this with you and Terry before, when I'm in my consulting sessions with my clients, this is one of the concepts we think about and we talk about. And one of the things that people will try to put into this quality component is customer service. Well, we answer our phones fast. We do this, we do that. And yeah, that's customer service. And it's different from that subtle thing that we call quality, which is the core of the product. What is the product, a quality product, and one that I want to come back and pay repeatedly for? My thoughts.
No, you're so right. And the net promoter score goes into that, right? I mean, that's so few companies really do the quality circle feedback loop with their clients to really understand, are they really doing the job well? It's astounding me. As you were talking, Marquita, I was thinking about Scott, the Chick-fil-A owner that we were honored to have on our earlier webinar earlier this year.
Yeah, a few weeks ago.
Man, so fascinating, the points he made. And I think about, here is a business owner, and he said, you know what? we're known for our customer service, but we hire in the same market as every one of our competitors, right? He said, basically, we're hiring high school kids is basically what he told us. And he said, we get the same group of applicants as everybody else does. But, you drive by a store and they've now have 5 drive-through lanes and a whole series of parking spaces where you text them as soon as you pull up and they run your order right out to you. And, they have learned to pivot and do things completely differently. And it wasn't about the quality of the product. Quality of the product remained, right? It's just about how they adjusted to serve that customer need due to the fact that they can't let them come into the dining rooms anymore. And remember, he said, we've had every month we've hit new records. And he said, in fact, it's been so good, we may never consider opening our dining room again. And I thought about, what an amazing pivot that business owner has taken. And in his same shopping center, there are 2 other fast food restaurants, and you never see the lines at their drive-throughs like his.
Yeah. Yeah, you bet. It's really funny that you bring him up, because I saw something on TV recently where someone made a comment that whoever is putting the process together for the COVID vaccine needs to go study Chick-fil-A, because they've got it down. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely right. I heard somebody at lunch today told me that from the vaccine distribution, why the heck doesn't the Biden administration just call Amazon and tell them, right?
Yeah,
they figured out to
let them
deliver it
figure
immediately.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's that kind of thinking. There are people that are at work on this, and I think you really got to focus on what does give you the enduring competitive advantage in the marketplace. And so that's the 4th question. Let's talk about number 5 here. What does the problem look like what does the world look like when you've solved the problem for the customer? Because if you think about your customers, they certainly are looking to get a problem solved, but actually what they're thinking about is the solution. They all dream of life after the problem, right? So how do you get them beyond where they are? And you as the business owner got to think about looking into the future. How does the world look for them when you've solved the problem that they have, right? So you've got to give some thought into that particular side of it and help the customer see that as well. So, thinking about those Chick-fil-A customers, all they want is to get a hot meal and get it as quickly as possible so they can get on their way and get home, right? And those guys have endeavored to figure out how to cut that wait time down to as little as possible so that the product has the best chance of being at the highest quality when it arrives in your hands. And I think that's some of the innovative thinking that we're talking about here. Key thing for your customers, how will you know when you've solved the problem? How will you know? In other words, what are the quantitative objective measurements that you can use to know that you fulfilled your mission with the client, right? With your customer client. And I think for Scott at Chick-fil-A, it's pretty easy. He can look out his window and see that he's got cars moving very, very rapidly, and they are taking very close count of when does the car enter our lot and when does the car exit our lot. So they want to know exactly how long it's been on their lot, and they measure their performance based on how quickly they can get that product into the customer's hands. And you just have to wonder if the other 2 restaurants in his shopping center were doing the same. What might that game look like, right? And how many more customers would come out to eat at their restaurants as well? So how will you know when the problem's solved for your customers? Will that mean that they come back to you much more often and rely on you to do that for them on a much more regular basis? So really, when you think about this, and this is kind of some people might say, well, maybe you should have had this question as the number 1 question, right? How will you make money? But I would invite you to think about this. You got to think about your business model for a minute. Is my business model the right model? Now, we talk a lot about in our coaching programs, and Marquita's a master at this, helping people think about how they put recurring revenue models into their business model and really thinking about the business model as a whole. Are you taking advantage of every potential way to serve the customer and help solve the customer's problems? And it all begins with that. That's really the starting point. The reason for being in business is to solve the customer's problems. And when you think about that first, customers are more than willing to pay to have their problem solved. Um, it's your responsibility to figure out how to help them solve the problem up front, and then how to charge for the problem and how to make money off of the problem is almost secondary, because there's that huge level of value that's delivered from the solution that the customer is looking for. And unfortunately, if they don't get the solution they're looking for, they'll leave. They'll vote with their feet. They'll go someplace else. Yeah. So that does tend to come first when you really stop and think about it. And it's not necessarily how you make money. Money is typically the byproduct of success in helping the customer serve the problem. And, that I think has been proven over and over again. Any industry you look at, they're all the same way in that regard. So those are the 7 questions. We invite you to think about those for your particular business. We've got several tools in our toolbox that can help you in that regard. We happen to utilize a system through our certification in the Value Builder platform, which defines these in some regular long-term thinking processes. And these tools are available to you. If you have any interest in learning more about those, you certainly know how to get in contact with us, and we'll have some of our contact information at the back. But we've got a lot of things where we have gone through this process with many, many businesses and are well equipped to walk you through that as well. So, we see a lot of companies that feel like they may not have the tools and the time to really think through a lot of these particular questions, and they're really foundational questions. If you find yourself in that position, we are certainly here to help with that with you. And I would say that this is one of those inflection points. Business has certainly suffered coming out of 2020. We're definitely facing a rebound, and now is a great time for you really to begin to think about all of these things and figure out how you can pivot to a point where you can thrive even beyond what you experienced in the past. So again, think about that whole pruning methodology and process in your business. At the end of the day, it's all about value. How do you deliver value to your markets? How do you deliver value to your customers? How do you deliver value within your communities? And as a result of that, how do you grow the value of your particular organization? Value that at some point in time you're going to want to access, because we have I think we can all agree that nobody is going to get out of this on their own, right? Every single business is going to convey at some point in the future. So while we've all got to get up and go to work every day, let's go to work and figure out how we can deliver the highest value for our customers, value for our employees in our business, and value for ourselves as owners of the business, value that we can then take advantage of when it's time for us to exit and hand off the business to the next steward of the particular entities. So we invite you to think about that. You'll see the replay and the slides of this if you'll want to download those and use those 7 questions in your thought process moving forward. If you'd like to talk about those, you can reach out to us in any of our major channels as well, directly through our website, through the You Don't Know What You Don't Know site, or through any of the social media channels, and we would be honored to engage with you. So Marquita, that's the presentation that I've got for us this week, and hopefully people will feel that there was some value delivered in that presentation this week.
Yes, Steve. Hopefully everyone will, sees that information and move forward with it. And what I would recommend to our participants, if you are CEO of your firm or leader of a team within your firm, think about using those questions as a brainstorming process. You don't have to be perfect about the framework. We do have a specific approach within the framework. But asking the question in and of itself and getting feedback from your team will begin to create brainstorming and clarity of ideas and thoughts. And one of the things that I've learned with my clients is, as my clients, who typically are the CEO of the firm, begin to have conversations with their team, they will come back to me and say, I was surprised where they were in sync with me, and I was surprised where they were not in sync with me. And it becomes a real clarity point for the leader of the team to understand the importance of communication and clear communication, because you learn what resonated in the past as you begin to ask these questions and discuss them with your team.
Yeah, and you might be really surprised at some of the answers you get too.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm always amazed at the collective wisdom that comes out of our weekly meetings.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Irene had sent us a note in the chat and she says, excellent information. Thanks so much. We don't have any questions per se. So I think that, Steve, we may be summarizing this and bringing it to conclusion just a few minutes early. I know we tend to run over about 5 minutes. I think we're going to finish up about 5 minutes early today. So with that, Steve, I think I kind of made my last comment relative to your presentation. Let me give you an opportunity to make any last comment you want, and then we'll begin to shut down the portal.
Outstanding. Well, again, Marquita, thank you very much. We're so appreciative of your stewardship of these webinars each week, and you do a marvelous job leading and moderating these, and we're so grateful for that. Folks, to the audience, I would say, if 2020 was a challenging year for your business, you've got to start rebuilding, the rebuilding process. 2021 is the opportunity to do that. Make it your best year ever. Go back to basics, really give some good long thought and consideration, and get your team involved in helping you with that, to really figuring out how can we make this thing better than it's ever been before. Because when you have an off year definitely, notches down your valuation a little bit when you're looking at fair market values of companies. Your valuation is going to be a component of your last 3 to 5 years of performance. So if you've had a down year, you got to bounce back and really think about how to rebuild that value and move it forward. So we strongly encourage you to do that. We hope these 7 essential questions will provide some food for thought for you in that regard. And Marquita's so right. Get your team involved and make it happen. And if there's anything that we can do to help you, you certainly know that we'll be available back here next week with some additional tips and techniques in that regard. But we would welcome your one-on-one engagement between now and then, and you all know how to get in touch with us. So we're honored that you devote the time to come join these webinars each week, and we hope we'll see you again next week. So Marquita, thanks again. We'll see you next week.
Thanks everyone for joining. We'll see you next week.
Take care.